Social media has changed our world. It's inspired more people than ever to take an active stance against injustice. But are these platforms creating meaningful action or simply creating more problems and encouraging performative activism? We're bombarded with so much information every day that it's important to take a step back and look at the facts and history to determine for ourselves, starting with the origins of social media.
This is the original model of the world's first telegraph.
We've come a long way from using smoke signals. In 1792, the telegraph revolutionized the field of long-distance communication. Not long after, telephones came around. Radio also united us, as the very tones you just heard moments ago were heard across the nation. Much later, another innovation was made. Genie, the General Electric Network for Information Exchange, was a very important form of social media from 1985 up through the late 90s before the World Wide Web. After Genie had had its heyday, it was time to move into the modern era of social media. So, in 1994, the chat room craze started with The Palace. Soon after, the first recognizable social media site where you could have a profile picture, connect with others, and do similar things appeared.
We hold out the promise to anyone with an email address to use our service and to locate the people they don't know. Let's take a look at it.
In 1997, 6 Degrees became the first of its kind. This is what visitors saw when they came to the site where it was all about who you know. In 1998, social media was for more than just connection for the first time. MoveOn.org was the first platform for activism. All this to say, nowadays most people use Facebook or one of their apps. Now that we understand the history of social media, let's dig into the history of American civil rights and similar activism. During the Reconstruction, Black Americans held more leadership positions in public offices than ever before. They pushed for pro-equality legislation and voting rights. Eventually, after much hard work, in 1868, the 14th Amendment gave equal protection under law. And in 1870, the 15th Amendment established voting rights. However, this newfound voice and freedom made whites uncomfortable, especially in the South. Although laws varied state by state, Jim Crow made segregation the norm in America. Public places, schools, and other things were segregated, as well as interracial marriage being largely banned. For the most part, these laws didn't exist in the North, but discrimination was still there. In 1896, all of these regulations were deemed legal in the case Plessy v. Ferguson in the United States Supreme Court. In World War II, Black Americans were discouraged from joining the military, and they were not offered jobs that were as high-paying as their white counterparts. However, they fought hard, although they did return to the same segregation that existed when they left. On a positive note, when President Truman ran on a civil rights platform during the start of the Cold War and signed into order Executive Order 9981 in the year 1948, military discrimination was ended and grassroots efforts for racial equality were sparked. This inspired the civil rights movement. Furthermore, in Brown versus the Board of Education, segregation was deemed illegal in public schools in the year 1954. In 1957, 9 children from a black school volunteered to attend Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, which was formerly an all-white school. They were met, however, by state National Guard opposition by the governor's order. They tried again later, but there was still violence. With the help of federal troop escorts, the Little Rock Nine finally made it to class, but they still faced prejudice once there. On September 9th of that same year, President Eisenhower signed the first major legislation of its kind since Reconstruction, the Civil Rights Act of 1957. The protection of voting was included in this act through federal prosecution for preventing someone else from voting and the formation of a commission to investigate voter fraud. The events previously described, sit-ins at Woolworth's lunch counter, the Freedom Riders, and more led to one of the most famous events in civil rights history, if not the most. On August 28, 1963, the March on Washington occurred. More than 200,000 people participated, and it culminated with Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Had a Dream speech for equality and freedom. After this, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 on July 2nd. It called for equal employment. And 1 year later, the Civil Rights Act of 1965 limited voter literacy tests. Poll taxes were also deemed illegal in a 1966 Supreme Court case. And along the way, federal enforcement of integration was also implemented. Although countless important events have happened since the 60s, it's time to skip ahead and talk about some more recent history in terms of activism and social justice. Black Lives Matter is both a movement and an organization. The organization was founded in 2013 by Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi because George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. In 2014, the murder of Mike Brown in Ferguson called for the organization and action that showed the founders that it was not only in that area, but national, that problems were occurring. Social media is integral to the campaign, and the organization is now a member-led global network of more than 40 chapters. Both the hashtag and the organization are currently focused on violations of Black women, especially Black trans women. In terms of activism on social media, the Dakota Access Pipeline protests, Black Lives Matter protests, and many more have been started or organized on social media. Online discussion becomes real events and conversations a lot of the time, and Black Lives Matter was able to start national discourse about race. Organizational communication is also changed by social media nowadays. Twitter is an organizational mechanism and is not just a platform for communication. It changes the structure of organizations and movements. Social media has also changed the way we pass down history. Wikis, for example, can bring together information from multiple sources to get the most accurate results possible by offering multiple perspectives. This means that in the future, when people try to look back on the events of today, they'll be able to understand what different activist groups were thinking better than in the past. We have more primary sources available now than ever. However, social media is not always used in this way productively. Facebook is one of the leading social media platforms. They have a series, Hard Questions, about the impacts of their products on society and how they try to regulate those. They have some provisions for free speech, but there are exceptions, such as posts that have the potential to cause physical or financial harm, those that include hate speech, or those that could be scams. They don't have to follow the same rules as governments do, but they are part of an initiative. They use the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights to set standards for when they can restrict free expression. The bottom line is that they want to prevent harm, but they do allow false statements. However, they put posts including these lower in news feeds and point users to accurate information. Other efforts by Facebook to protect people's voices include blocking fake accounts, allowing users to control what they see, and having anti-bullying features, such as a feature that stops users before posting potentially harmful content and makes them think twice. There's even a quiz you can take to see if your post will be allowed on the site or if you understand what the guidelines are. Microblogging, slacktivism, performative activism, whatever you want to call it, is often ineffective. So, I met with local community leaders and advocates to learn about how social media can be used effectively for real activism and how to avoid drowning out those whose voices matter the most. Through these interviews, I learned that while social media is a great tool for spreading information, it's important to fact-check anything you see through reputable sources. You also have to own up to it when you get something wrong. Additionally, it's best used as a tool to mobilize you, to make you get out and do something, to sign a petition, donate, etc. So use social media and make your activism action. Reach beyond the screen.